To start off, Part 5 is a Pokemon originally from the 3rd generation. Now before anyone points out that it wasn't originally in Gen 3, technically yes it is. It was originally going to be in Gen 3, but the developers decided later to put it in the next generation. Plus, I like to screw with expectations sometimes. Anyways, from looking at Gastrodon's stats, you may think that it's a shitty Pokemon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, would you be surprised if I told you that it's in the OU tier? And it's one of the most reliable counters to Water-type Pokemon in the metagame? Some of you might ask,
oh, how's that possible?
2 words, Storm Drain, which increases Gastrodon's special attack stat when hit with a Water-type attack. So you could use Gastrodon to switch into a Pokemon using a Water-type attack on it, and you can reap the benefits. Plus, with Gastrodon having the typing of Water and Ground, the only weakness it has is the Grass type, which I would honestly prefer over an Electric Water type that can't do shit. Gastrodon is based on a Sea Slug, and it looks so cute! But I guess that does raise the question though. East Sea or West Sea? I'd go for East. Why? Because pink is too hipster for me. The last Gen 1 starter on this list, the Bulbasaur line is my favorite of the original starters, and here's why! Starting off with Bulbasaur, not only do I like its typing of Grass and Poison, but I also liked Ash's Bulbasaur in the anime. It was one of Ash's more mature Pokemon, frequently viewed as the responsible leader of the team. It was also very useful for Ash in his Kanto and Johto battles, before Ash left it at Professor Oak's place. As for Ivysaur, it's pretty good in Smash Brothers, and it does get a little better stat-wise. And then we have Venusaur. Venusaur is a pretty good Pokemon to use in the OU tier, with its great special stats and its ability Chlorophyll, which gains speed in the sun, making it pretty much essential on a sun team. And because of its stats, Venusaur can either be a sweeper in the sun, a supporter, or even a wall to help out the team. Now that's great multitasking. Plus, with its typing, it has 5 resistances, albeit at the cost of 4 weaknesses, and is useful against the new Fairy type. That's pretty cool. What's also cool is its design. Bulbasaur is adorable, Ivysaur looks pretty cool, and despite Venusaur's derp face, it looks pretty good for a Pokemon based on a combination of reptiles and frogs. Overall, I really like the Bulbasaur line. All of them have great qualities to them, and I really like them. And to close it off,
hey Venusaur, why do you have bloodshot eyes in the stadium game?
Smoke weed every day.
as I showed before, some Pokemon are on this list because I like them as Pokemon and not as weapons. This is another example of that. This one may raise a few brows, but I'm a big fan of Granbull. I like its design. Based on a Bulldog, it's a pretty good physical attacker in the UU tier, and I like its abilities. Intimidate lowers your opponent's physical attack stat by 1 stage, Quick Feet increases your speed when hit by a status effect, and Rattled increases your speed stat when hit by a Bug, Ghost, or Dark type attack. This Pokemon was pretty effective when I first used it in Pokemon Showdown with moves like Outrage and Return, and that's really about it, and even then I was only really successful with that when I used it in UU. I wish I could describe more about Granbull, but there's nothing really left to talk about. I like Granbull, I really do, but there's nothing else really to talk about it. One of the 2 Pokemon needed to unlock the Regis, Relicanth is a rock and water type from the 3rd generation. Said to be over 100 million years old, Relicanth devours microorganisms with its toothless mouth and was discovered during a deep sea exploration, which might explain why it can only be found in Gen 3 by diving. Speaking of which, let's dive into its battle properties. Relicanth is a physical attacker. With moves like Head Smash and Waterfall, it can hit hard, especially with a Life Orb, but it gets even better. Introducing Rockhead! This ability neutralizes recoil damage, so while you hit with Head Smash, you will only take damage from the Life Orb item if you put it on him. That's pretty cool, but its other abilities are pretty good as well. Swift Swim doubles its speed when the rain is out, and Sturdy prevents her from being one-hit KO'd as long as it has full health. Granted, its move pool doesn't help its physical attack stat, and its weaknesses doesn't help Relicanth's typing. But when Relicanth works, it really works, especially when I used it on Showdown. This thing was really effective. Okay, how do I start this entry? Have you guys ever wanted a Fire Psychic Pokemon? No! Having the highest base attack of all Fire-type Pokemon, and the highest special attack stat for Psychic types when it's in Zen mode, Darmanitan is one of the strongest Pokemon in Gen 5. Based on a combination between an ape and the Daruma doll, Darmanitan is a physical attacker. And considering that achievement I mentioned earlier, it certainly lives up to that title. In fact, its internal fire burns at 1,371 degrees Celsius, or 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can destroy a dump truck with one punch. Combine that attack stat with Sunny Day and a choice scarf or life orb, it's no longer a revenge killer, but a freaking serial killer to your opponent's team. A for everyone, ladies and gents! Granted, it does have bad defenses, but when it loses enough of its health when it has its hidden ability, it transforms into Zen mode, a fire psychic type who's mainly focused on special attack instead of physical attack. But its power can still be very effective. But what about its main ability, Sheer Force? What does it do? Well, Sheer Force raises base power of all attacking moves that have an additional effect by 30%. But it also ignores the additional effect. It also has some pretty good resistances in both modes, and I did enjoy its fight with Oshawott in the anime, even though it was short. So, what about its appearance in the manga?
What the fuck?
The desert can be one of the worst places on the planet. It's really hot there, to the point where people can suffer mirages. It's lifeless with the exception of plants like cacti, and I just hate it. But at least we're not in the Pokemon world. In those deserts, if you see a nest of bones, run for your lives. This is flat out the weirdest entry I've put thus far. Odds are, if you were to have a conversation about dark types, Mandibuzz would probably be brought up for the title of worst dark type ever. As you can tell from the entry, I don't agree with that. Though, there's a better dark type coming up. I love Mandibuzz's design. Based on vultures, it certainly looks threatening. Though with the bones it has on its body, it also appears to have some relations to cavemen. As for battle properties, Mandibuzz is one of the best defensive Pokemon in the NU tier with a 105 base defense stat and 95 base special defense stat. Combine that with good speed and great support moves, Mandibuzz can be a wall, stall breaker, and supporter all at once. So again, great multitasking. Plus with its typing of dark and flying, it gets ground and psychic immunities. That's great. And with its great speed, it can beat a lot of stall teams with taunt and foul play, which it gets stab on. However, with its typing, it also gets 4 weaknesses, including the new fairy type, and it can only be relied on strictly with its bulk to take hits. But I still think Mandibuzz is great to use nonetheless, especially with its abilities. What are its abilities, you may ask? Well, let's start with Big Pecs. Big Pecs prevents its defense stat from being lowered. Overcoat gives Mandibuzz immunity to weather damage, which is something I completely forgot about when I did Reuniclus's entry. And Weak Armor boosts its already great speed by 1 stage at the cost of lowering defense by 1 stage when hit by a physical move. Overall, Mandibuzz is a great Pokemon to use, and I highly recommend it in the NU tier. Hell, even RU. Based on a Manta Ray, Mantine is a bit difficult to describe its use in competitive play. With the highest special defense of all flying Pokemon, and tied with Kyogre for the highest special defense for water types, it appears to be a special wall. But with its ability Swift Swim, it can also be a good special sweeper. But a lot of its move pool is based on physical attack, and Mantine's base attack stat of 40? No, it just won't cut it. What doesn't help Mantine is its typing. Okay, this may just be me, but I'm indifferent to the water flying type. Most of them aren't that great stat-wise, with exceptions like Mantine and Gyarados, and that 4 times weakness to electric doesn't help matters. But I will say this, for a positive on that typing. It only has one other weakness. It gets 5 resistances and a ground immunity. So it's debatable to me if this typing is horrible or good. I'm kind of on the fence. That's why I say I'm indifferent to it. Speaking of positives, I love Mantine's design, especially that mouse. It's like the kitty face you see in chat rooms, and it is pretty funny. Plus, Water Absorb and Water Veil are really good abilities to use. Mantine may have its issues, but if you want a good water flying type from Gen 2, I highly recommend this on your team. Ladies and gentlemen, my favorite wall in Pokemon. At first glance, some people are either thinking,
Wave, why is this type of shit on your list?
or
Wave, why is this so low on your list?
or you just don't care like me.
Yeah, thanks for wasting the viewers' time with that useless skid, dumbass.
When Gen 2 came around, I think Blissey was responsible for what Smogon users today call a wall. Or it could be Queen difficulty shift here, but I digress. Blissey has the highest single base stat of all Pokemon thus far. Its base HP stat is 255. How high can it get with IVs and crap? Oh, it's probably nothing but 7. Granted, it's special wall with its special defense stat reaching as high as 405, but still, that's impressive. This is one of the reasons it's in the OU tier after all. So what other factors make it a wall, you may ask? Well, let's hop in. First off, its abilities. Natural Cure heals any status condition Blissey has when switched out. Serene Grace doubles the chance of a move's additional effect kicking in, with the exception of status moves, and Healer has a 30% chance to heal a teammate of their status condition every turn. Blissey also has a great move pool to help it as a wall, and even support, such as Wish, Aromatherapy, and Soft Boiled. Plus, if you give it leftovers, it pretty much negates weather damage and entry hazards, with the exception of Toxic Spikes. I also love its design, it looks so cute, and I also like its personality the Pokédex gives it. Blissey always tries to deliver happiness to everyone, and one of its ways is by using its eggs, which are said to make a person who eats the kind of everyone. That's really cool. It also shares some traits with Nurse Joy. When it sees the sick Pokemon, it will do what it can to heal it. And when it senses sadness, no matter how far away, it will rush over to the sad person to share an egg of happiness that brings a smile to their face. That's really sweet. Granted, Gen 5 reduced Blissey's usefulness with a lot more special sweepers brought into the metagame, such as Keldeo, and the introduction of Eviolite, which increases a non-fully evolved Pokemon's defense by an insane amount, giving it strict competition from Pokemon like Chansey. But I will always love Blissey. It was a great wall against my opponents, it was the best support on my team, and I just love to use it. In part 1, I talked about Samurott. Now I think it's time I talk about another Gen 5 starter, and it's not Emboar. My first starter I used in Gen 5, Serperior was a really good Pokemon to use. Based on snakes, Serperior is what fans call a jack of all trades. But what does that mean? Simple. With its good stats all across the board, with the highest being speed reaching a maximum of 357, and moves like Calm Mind and Coil, Serperior can pretty much do anything. It can set up screens, it can taunt your opponents, and it can do so much more. Sure, it's not the Jesus of Pokemon, but I do like that unlike a lot of other grass starters, it's really balanced. As for abilities aside from Overgrow, Contra reverses stat changes. This can be both a good and bad thing depending on when it's used. Plus, I also love its design. As I've said before, it's based on a snake, and not a big fan of snakes, but I like this one. That elegant figure and collar makes it kind of look like a member of the French royalty. Regardless, Serperior was a really great Pokemon to use in Pokemon White with its great moves pool and stats, and it helped me beat some of the gym leaders that Pheasant couldn't beat, especially with Dragontail helping out. Oh, and to those Emboar fans, don't worry, you'll be seeing Emboar soon. Trust me. To close out part 5 is the Pokemon I hinted back when I had 500 subs. Another line entry, but I absolutely love the Walrein line. It's great typing of ice and water, its awesome design, its usefulness when I played Ruby, and the list goes on. The entire line is based on seals/walruses. That's kinda clever, as seals are usually found in the Arctic/ice patches. Spheal to me just screams cute. That face, that smile, those eyes, that clip. Celio is pretty useful on the battlefield, and it has a pretty good design as well. And then there's Walrein. In terms of battle properties, Walrein focuses on hail support, especially with an ability like Ice Body, which heals 1/16 of its maximum HP every turn as long as hail is out. As for non-hail support, Thick Fat is a good ability to have as well, as it boosts Walrein's resistances to fire and ice attacks, and its Dreamworld ability Oblivious prevents Walrein from getting infatuated/falling for taunts. So overall, its abilities are pretty good for an ice and water type, but why would I put a Pokemon like Walrein higher than something like Charizard or Sceptile? Well, since I couldn't find Lapras, a water-ice type, in the 3rd generation, Walrein was the next best choice in my mind due to its typing and stats. Because of this, Walrein proved to be one of the most useful members of my team, taking down Sydney, Drake, and even helping defeating the champion Steven. Thanks for the memories, Walrein line, but now it's time to move on. Voice check initiated.
So, this is the voice I get. Alright. But now it's time to follow Fawn's orders. Let's see what this Mounty is capable of.
Excellent.